Sorry about that. Um, so with 2025, I just want us to keep some of that in mind. This year is like the culmination of a 5-year period that has been very critical in determining the direction that people are going. Um, 2025 is like that pivotal point, and it doesn't mean that there's absolutely no way to make a shift, I guess, but pretty much we've had a lot of time to choose the direction we are going as a collective, as a human race, um, here on Earth. And so a lot of what happens after this year is going to be more about things playing out. And again, I always believe that there's hope and there's possibility, and I think ultimately that comes down to again, how much divine presence, how much God energy are we holding in the world and choosing to hold. And no matter what direction things take, if we hold that energy, we will be able to maintain the most, I don't know if I want to say positive, but the most favorable energy that we can in that process. Um, so it will see us through no matter what turn or what direction things go with it. So in this year, of course, we look at a lot of things being in timing and cycles because this is finishing up a several different cycles in 2025. And, all of time is built in these cycles, whether we talk, a year, a decade, whatever, centuries, it's all built in these cycles. Seasons are built in cycles, all of these things. So when we are working with these cycles, of course, we've got divine timing. We're in divine timing. We're in divine flow with things, and we will not force our will or way onto things to meet our earthly schedules. And this is an important thing because I think one of the things I notice is I see a lot of people who get very um, impatient or they get very um, fearful about time. And we look at that a lot with people who are, especially younger generation. It's like, whoa, we don't have much time left in the world, or we just have this one year. And again, even though we've got this very critical year happening, at the same time, we still want to rest into that divine timing and not just be focusing on that earthly timing or point because when processes are happening in the world, they're based on divine timing. They're not based on our chronological calendars. So a lot of times when people are asking, well, when is such and such going to happen? Well, it's going to happen after a certain set of sequence of events happens. And that doesn't run by a calendar. So, that's where we really want to embrace these cycles. So kind of like weather patterns, we can often find where we're at in a cycle. And because of these repeating patterns, when we do this, it is important that we take a short range, a mid range, and a long range look at things. Okay. And the reason for this is because if we only focus on one piece of it, um, we can't operate very wisely, and it can put us in fear instead of ease. So an example of this is like some of the climate stuff. If you only look at the very short term components, like a 10 or a 20-year period, it's going to look like the warming up, right? It's going to look like everything's, headed to this global warming sort of disaster piece, and it's heating up. If you look at the midterm picture of that, um, it may be showing, hey, there's really not a lot of difference. If you look at it over, I don't know, 100 years or something like that, there's not really a lot of difference in what's happening or a lot of variation. And if you look at the longer term or the broader perspective, it's going to show we're not heating, it's going to show we're cooling. So, see, this is where some of these confusion and different things happen is because people are looking at one perspective of it and they're not this short range, mid range, and long range perspective on it or looking at it from multiple perspectives. So it's through these realize that, for example, okay, we're in a slight warming period of a much colder era. that everything is actually operating within its natural and normal cycles. So there's really nothing to fear or to worry about from that component or that aspect. And this is something that's been going on for centuries and thousands of years. And so if we, again, only look at that one piece, then it's very easy to fall into the fear or the concerns or the worries of things. Now, 2025 is a year where we're coming full circle on everything. So, again, a lot of these pieces, they start to make sense when we look at multiple components of them. And 2025 is this full circle kind of moment where it's all about finishing things that we've started. And in particular, it's going to have a lot to do with meeting responsibilities and obligations and um, things like that. So it's, especially things that we've already committed to, things that we've already set in motion is going to be very important for us to be completing during this year. So this is not just a matter of kind of let's put a couple of finishing touches on things and clean up the mess that's that's been happening or that we've created. But this year it brings with it again these major responsibilities and obligations because it's really directing which way we're going to go in the future, and things just can't be rushed through. They have to be handled, as we say, with those white gloves or that delicate touch or stepping on things, and in some ways this can feel like, hey, we're trying to maneuver through a bomb field here. And in some ways there might be some reality to it because there probably is a lot of stuff that could get very explosive or get very um, you know, be very dangerous to walk through. But we're going to get through it. I think that's the thing to keep in mind is no matter what things look like or how treacherous the terrain gets, as they say, we're going to get through it. And holding that in mind is important. Um, there are many that are going to kind of fall away when this real work comes up. Really good about talking about things. They're really good about saying, "Oh yeah, I want to have this increase in spiritual vibration in the world." On the other hand, when it gets down to doing the real work and actually having to put the effort in to make things happen, well, then that becomes a whole different story for a lot of people. And we're going to probably see a lot of people bail out when it gets down to this real work, which is coming up in 2025. And they really have to do something and they really have to be active in the process and not just post something nice out there or post, whatever out there to, in support. And so this is going to be kind of a game changer, and we're really going to see who those real warriors are to a certain extent, who's really willing to get in there and um, to do what needs to be done. So we're probably also going to find a lot of distractions and suggestions that people want us to take, and we have to be really, really careful of that because this can lead us in unfavorable directions. If we're just listening to people, and they might mean well, I think we're going to see maybe some people in our personal lives, and also, in other parts like world influences or whatever, we're going to see people who um, they may mean well, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily leading us in a favorable direction. And we're going to have to use a lot of discernment in that. And we shouldn't take somebody's advice just because they're putting advice out there. We need to do our own research. We need to decide, is this going to work for me? Is it not going to work for me? Um, and really take a closer look at that in there. So that's a key thing. And we have to really look at what is that practical, that responsible thing that needs to be done. So kind of really staying on our toes around all of that. We need to stay true to being on favorable paths. And, you know, basically one of my core guidelines for that is, does it increase God or divine presence in the world, or does it decrease it? And that's a big measuring factor for me. Is it 100% absolute? No, because you could kind of waver in and out a little bit as far as what things are and are not, you know, along those lines. And I'm sure different people have different opinions on that. But very easy for people to tell others what they should be doing, but these are people that, again, rarely are doing the work. So we have to who we're listening to. If we have a lot of people who are telling us what to do, we want to stop and look and say, well, what are those people doing in their life? Are they actually doing the things that they're saying we should be doing? And if they're not, then why would we be listening to them? So that's kind of a core piece in there. Um, and then, uh, and Mindy, can you please mute yourself? Um, and so, um, with that, really just wanting to kind of, again, that discernment is a huge, huge thing. So even those that have, again, good intentions can mislead us. So we're doing a lot of major transforming of the material world and our reality during this year. So again, that brings in kind of that critical essence of things. As we do this, it's really important that we bring the material pieces into divine alignment, and that's going to be key. That's going to be a huge, huge key, whether we do that. And money needs to be earned in responsible ways as we're going through this year. You know, if we see shady business deals or earnings, that's probably going to lead us into a greater detriment and create bigger responsibilities and issues for us to deal with. We're going to see that money flows into spiritual work, mission purposes, ethical and humane ventures, and work that nurtures positive experience. Now, again, discernment, 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 because as we know, there's a lot of so called humanitarian groups or projects or organizations out there, and they're not truly that. We know that they're just funneling money to other things, and they're not really doing the work that they claim to be doing. And that includes some very well established organizations in there. So the key is always to know who is truly doing this work and who only appears to be doing the work. People want to support good causes, and I think that that's always a positive. You know, even people that sometimes are misled in things or they're not aware of certain things, um, I always come back to at least these people have good heart, because as more and more things come out and we learn more things, those people will continue to want to do the right thing. And I would, you know, love to be surrounded by people who want to do that right thing, so to say, that want to help people, who want to be in compassion. And they just may not realize again how corrupt some of these organizations are. And that's going to be, you know, a hard thing for them to learn, where some of them are not um, doing the good that they claim to be doing. Responsible action brings divine alignment. So, this is a big thing. Sometimes that responsible action doesn't feel very fun. It doesn't feel very exciting. It doesn't feel very um, rewarding at times, but in the end, it always is. And the more that we can operate in this responsible action, the more that we will keep that divine alignment, and that will naturally build up celestial insurance, that will build up um, natural divine protection in things. So that's going to be a good thing. And in turn, that divine alignment then shows us what is needed. So, you know, it's kind of a nice um, rotating circle in there. The responsibility brings divine alignment. Divine alignment shows us what we need to be doing and what we need to be focusing on. And we may not always like what needs to be done. So that's going to be hard for some people, again, because we have a lot of people, they want their way, their will, instead of God's will in things, or instead of the will of divine source in things. And that is going to be challenging for people, because we're so programmed as humans a lot of times to um, that certain things are what we want or should have or are fun or whatever, and they're really not. When we get down to it, they oftentimes can be very destructive things. But we want to come back in and just realize that it's kind of like the reward is inherent in the action in a way, and when we can uphold this responsibility, even if our human self is kind of kicking and screaming about it a little bit, um, that we actually will come out pretty well for that, and that will help lead to bigger successes. So this year's not just about doing what we want and what is enjoyable, but it's important for us to understand what is truly needed and to follow through on getting things done. So there's going to be plenty of time for more enjoyable things. Okay? Like 1 year can seem like a long time, but it's a little speck, in the bigger picture of things. And so we want to understand what's truly needed. There will be time for play later on, but if we don't take care of what's needed, then we're not going to get to those enjoyable things. And I think that's the one of the keys to keep in mind. So this takes us to needing to take a strong look at what we want in our next cycle, what we want that to be like, and what we want to focus on. This year requires us to have some careful consideration. What direction do we want to go in? And that's a good question for us to be asking. And we want to reflect really on kind of the past 9 years from start to finish. We want to take the time to see how that cycle has played out in our life. Look, take some time. We're getting ready to transition into this year. Look back. What's happened over the last 9 years? How have things shifted? How have they changed? What have been some of the successes, the challenges, the transformations, the breaking points? The wisdom gain, opportunities. Take a look and review it. There's been a lot that's happened in the world, but also in our individual lives in there. So it's going to be very important in 2025 to focus on removing as much debt as possible. And this is part of this responsibility piece, and it weighs so heavy this year on us. And again, I realize that means for a lot of people, that means not having as much so called fun. But again, if we take care of the debt, we can have the fun later. If we don't take care of the debt and these things, we're not going to be able to have that fun. So, that's a big piece. Now, this will require responsible choices and actions, and we'll have to look at what the true needs are versus our desires. But there's a real beauty if we want to tune into it. There's a great beauty in being practical, and the blessings there can be really numerous for us if we're willing to embrace them. If we can just again get past that societal programming that we tend to live in. And in many ways, this is a huge divine gift, this responsibility, um, and something that we should not be resisting this. We should not be resisting it, rebelling against it, or dreading it. Yes, it takes work. Yes, it takes effort, but the rewards are incredible when we do put that in. Speculation is going to be a really big piece in 2025, and that's an important piece that we will want to stay on top of. So it is important that we really work with the resources that we have in hand, not what we believe should be coming in, not what might be coming in through a paycheck in 2 weeks or whatever. What do you have currently in the bank account, in your hands, physically already present to work with, and focus on working within that. It, I find that under this energy, if we sit there and go, "Oh, it's okay. I've got, I'll be able to take care of this over the next 3 or 4 paychecks or whatever. Um, it'll be fine." A lot of times something comes up and interferes with us getting that money in. There may be delays, there may be mishaps, there could be all kinds of things that come up. And then we put ourselves in a bad position. That's part of speculation. So we want to say, okay, what could I do today? What do I actually have sitting in the account already that I could do today? And that's what we have to work with. And again, I know that doesn't always sound very fun, but it is well worth it when you start to do this. And it takes a lot of stress and a lot of pressure off in the long run. When we start to do that. So it's hard. If people do choose to operate in speculation or debt and false resources, then they're probably going to take some hard falls and it's going to be rough. But if they, because in a way what they're doing is they're creating their own ruin. in that situation, and it will likely put them into a greater detriment. So this I just can't really stress that enough. And then this often goes hand in hand with allowing others again to persuade us to do things that we don't really have the resources for. And we have to be able to say no to people. No, I don't have the resources for that. And that's not a deprivation thing. That's not a lack mindset. That is a responsibility mindset. And we can always say, you know what, when I build the resources up, I can do that. But right now, no, I don't want to put myself further in debt because every time I do that, I'm pulling myself away from God and divine source instead of connecting myself closer in. So, we're going to probably see a lot of this stuff where there's going to be more so than maybe even in the past, people pushing programs that tell you, oh, just spend 300 bucks, 500 bucks, 1,000 bucks, whatever the program cost is, and it's going to turn your life around and you'll have a six-figure income and, you know, and you'll have everything that you want. And these are all really temptations that get us to chase money and that pull us out of divine alignment for somebody else's personal gain. So a lot of those programs, yes, maybe some people do succeed at them. Some people chase the money and it works. But I can tell you that most of the time, very few people see the benefits off of them. Um, and the only people that are really making money are the people that are pushing the programs on there. So do be careful of that. Um, and we really just need to get the lesson that we cannot spend what we don't have. This is a critical, critical lesson for us to have. So, credit programs, the layaways, all of that stuff, those were never really designed to help people. Those were designed to put people in debt and to hold them in debt. And what it was doing and what it has been doing is creating addictive spending patterns on oftentimes frivolous things. Not always. Some people used it responsibly and it worked for them. But for a lot of people, what it was doing was getting them in this habit of spending money that they didn't have, spending money irresponsibly, going after what they wanted versus what they needed. And that has really set a lot of people in in a bad pattern, in a detrimental pattern. To work from, and it's a trap. It's kind of like gambling at a casino. It lets you think, oh, I've got this and I'm achieving and I'm moving along further in the world, but then you just end up spending more and more, and then pretty soon it just takes you for everything that you have. So just remember that, fancy, extravagant designer stuff doesn't make something better in there. So this is going to be a good time for us to get back to insisting on things being made with quality and not being so disposable with things. And I think that that's going to be an important shift for us as well. When we do that, that really helps us out a lot, getting out of this disposable mindset of things in there. We've had a pretty big price that we've paid for living as a disposable world, and we really haven't gained that much from doing it when we weigh everything out. And the shift is pretty simple. It's just about making some wise choices along the way. And this connects with our need to carefully consider our path. Um, Partnerships and connections, we have to be careful with that because they can either bring fortune just by association with people. So again, you know, you got to be a little bit careful around you and just do your so you can hold them in integrity without having to call them out constantly. There's certainly ways to do that. And a lot of that comes down to you choosing to stand in integrity. And if somebody else is going down a path that isn't in integrity, you don't follow them going down that path. So it's a kind of basic thing with that. Let's see here. Um, we need to be really cautious of supporting companies and people that are primarily about profits and don't really support people. That's going to be a big one. And so this is just realizing a lot of people come up with things and they say, well, we still want to support these companies and we still want to have foreign products and things like that in our country. And that's all fine. But what we want to do is to get those companies to um, be manufacturing and doing things here in our own country, um, where we can actually employ our own people for that and to do those things. So again, this is coming back to we've got to take care of our our home base, and every country should be doing that. And every country is going to have to look at that this year. Some things may not, we may not be able to fully avoid them, but we can look at them and use them in moderation. We can continue to search out and to try to use local and quality resources where possible. I know for myself, I would rather have a little less of something and have it be of good quality and locally made than just always going for the cheapest thing out there. And I feel like I'm in a place to speak about that, considering um, how I live my life and not having the resources that a lot of people have to work with. So I think that it definitely can be done. It doesn't, it's even with minimal resources, you don't have to be in total deprivation by any means. It's just a lot of times about moderation and balancing things and being responsible with things. It's kind of like saying, i- you should, we don't like to think, oh, I'd never put, a single spoonful of sugar in my mouth. And granted, even though it's not a healthy thing on one hand. On the other hand, if your body is fully functioning and, 99% of the time you're eating really well and you're doing great things for your body and all of that, that one spoonful of sugar on a very rare occasion is not going to kill you. Um, uh, so those are the kinds of things that we want to keep in mind. And this is a year where we want to stay with things that are certain, not taking real major chances. Again, go with what is solid in things. And since people may not always follow through on their promises, we really want to consider what we can handle on our own. So you're going to have those people who will be responsible, but you're also going to have those people that'll be like, yeah, I don't feel like doing it, so I'm not. And we're going to have to watch out for that. So we've got to know, um, the key is, yeah, what can you handle on your own? If everybody else bailed on you, could you handle what needs to be done? And that's a piece that I think kind of keeps me going. Um, but also, if you know your community resources, um, then that's going to help out because you know who can handle different things or will handle different things. And this is not just about, okay, we got this chain store, so I can go to Dollar Tree or Walgreens or whatever. But what are your local people offering? Because those are the people that are going to see you through a lot of times in this year. And I'm not talking just about, okay, what can I walk to in 15 minutes, but realizing that should anything that happens that interrupts the supply chains, um, basically you're going to be down to those local individuals in your community. So who are those farmers and who are the people that are supplying for the community? And it's good to know them even if you don't have to use them. I prefer to use them as much as I can. But again, just knowing the resources in case you have to, in case these interruptions come up, because there's no doubt we're going to be in for some turbulence this year. Every year has some challenges and turbulence to it. So you want to look at what can I get to easily and safely. And, again, no, you don't only have to purchase in that, small little radius, but in emergency situations, you want to know where you can go and not be trying to figure it out in the moment of an emergency situation in there. So distance is going to be very active this year. Um, Really going to get into letting us know that we need to step up and deal with things. Again, this is not the year that we can resist, rebel, and just try to push things off. That's not going to work this year. The more that we do that, the more that we're going to, the more those things that have to be done are going to get in our face. the more that, we're going to get the pressure coming in on us. And the harder it is to get things done, the harder it is to get through things. So the more we procrastinate, the more we resist things, the worse it's going to get, the harder, the heavier the energy is going to get. So if we just face it and we deal with it and we do what needs to be done, then then we can get through it certainly easier. So we want to take a look when we're considering these things, where are we feeling stress and anxiety? And then deal with whatever is creating that or triggering that within us. So, really big thing for us to deal with. And this also helps to strengthen us. Again, when we're living responsibly and we're facing these things, then even when chaos sets in at different points, then we're going to be able to deal with it. We'll be in a stronger place to deal with it. So the reality is that once we embrace things and take them on willingly, then we're likely to find that they're maybe not so hard to do after all, or at least not as hard as we were building up in our mind. And it's important that we, again, complete what we've started. That's a huge theme this year. Complete what we've started. We want to finish meeting any of the responsibilities and obligations that we're already committed to. And if those obligations and responsibilities feel like a lot to deal with, then we need to consider, what can I let go? Is there something I can let go of if possible once we finish them? So we don't want to just leave things unfinished, but um, if we do, again, it just makes it bigger and harder to do. They're not just going to magically go away this year. So they've got to be faced. And this is a year to calling us to stay true. What is best for you? Again, not what other people tell you you should be doing, but what is best for you? What is going to work for you? And unreliable, especially if they're lazy or they're living in excessive ways. And it's important that we don't pick for others them out or allow them to dump their work on us. There's always exceptions to this, right? Because you have those people who maybe they're responsible 99% of the time. They're always showing up, they're always helping people out, and they have, whatever family emergency, or they don't feel well and they get sick or something, and they need, time off, and things need to be covered. Well, that's fine. You cover for that person, right? But the person who's always taking off of work, the person who's always trying to get out of things, those are not the people we want to cover for. They need to deal with their own stuff. They need to be responsible for their own things. And sometimes that means you got to let somebody fall, because if we don't let them fall, they're never going to learn how to stand up. And that's an important piece. So life can feel a bit heavy this year. It can feel a bit burdensome this year, but it's going to help to regularly acknowledge our successes, and that is going to be very important. And this is all part of enjoying the positive accomplishments. So even though it feels heavy, I mean, it's kind of like housework in a way, right? You got these chores that have to be done, but when you get them done, it actually feels good and you actually have a sense of success. And we can have that, and we want to acknowledge those successes. And, in turn, what happens here is the more we do this, and we acknowledge the positive accomplishments, we can come to know true fulfillment, wholeness, and completion. And that is so important for us to get into this year, that feeling of fulfillment, wholeness, and completion. And in turn, that then allows us to work from the whole, the easier it will be to handle things as well. Um, and again, the more we can tie off those loose ends and the more we remove that heaviness that we feel from what needs to be done. So there's again, this big energy, but I don't want it to, even though we have this big, heavy energy, we also have other components that are very um, beneficial and abundance based. And for some people, that is, they want to associate abundance with money, but abundance is not always associated with money. So we want to be a little bit careful for that. Now, in our ongoing influences that we have, uh, about over things, um, you know, sometimes in the ongoing influences because they're bigger influences, they're slower moving, so we don't always notice them or we don't always pay attention to them. But we don't want to ignore them either. And right now, as we go into this year, when we look at the era that we're in, we have just started a new era. And that new era started around November of 2024, and it's going to continue until January of 2044. So it's about a 20-year period that we're looking at in here, not quite a 20-year period, a little over 19 years, really. And this is a time where some can feel almost the sense of being very desolate during this time. We could easily see aspects of segregation, of separation, and isolation happening during this time. And that's going to be hard for some people. I think when we see this type of energy, that's when we start seeing a lot of world events that are hard and challenging to deal with. And again, we've ignored the reality of things that have been happening in our world, and now they're coming up and we're being faced to deal with them because we haven't been paying a lot of attention along the way in here. So there are going to be, again, these aspects happening, and there will be those who are compliant and they just want to be part of the in group or the so-called popular kids or, be seen as whatever, elite or whatever in things. And then there's going to be those that um, don't find themselves in any, if they don't play that game, they may be experiencing an aspect of being shunned. And this kind of takes us back to some of the pandemic stuff. And we know that some of um, there are things that are being pushed that are pandemic like in our world now, and they're trying to move in that direction. Do I completely believe everybody's going to buy into it? No, but we do have these code components where there can still be people that have things going on, whether that is illness or other things that can create these isolations or these separations from people and aspects of life in there. So, those that seek a life of purpose over materialism may be outcast by the mainstream during this time. So, again, having to build that personal strength. And it's not because they're a problem, but because they will not do the things for the sake of being accepted by others in there. We're going to see some that become very self sacrificing. So they're going to kind of move into that martyr space during this time. And they're going to probably take themselves down in that process. And I say that it's just like, when you're not feeling well and you're on the edge of being sick, but then you just keep doing and doing and doing and doing for people and, when that happens, you end up burning yourself out and then you can't do anything for people in there. So we've got to be very careful of that pattern. We need to find our balance and we need to honor taking care of ourselves and making ourselves a priority. And that will be hard for some people. But it's going to be important to do. So you've got to know what you can handle, where you need to say no, where you need to back off before you get yourself into trouble. And it's during this time that we're going to see a lot of people returning to churches. There's going to be people seeking monastic lifestyles, living in isolation, reestablishing a stronger connection with the earth. And a lot of material wealth and resources are going to probably be diminished. So, the more that we can come into, again, this responsibility piece that's active this year, the easier it is going to be dealing with this era that we're in and that we're moving into. But again, if we really tune into true abundance, then we're never going to feel deprived during this time. We may not be living excessive lifestyles and, multiple mansions and things, but we're going to have enough. And we can still be very happy and have what we need and have enough to even share with other people. So it's not like we have to be in deprivation just because resources are not flowing maybe in the same way that they have in the past in there. And again, this is all about shifting. And of course, the benefits that come out of this is that it leads people to return more to natural remedies, to grow their own medicinals, to find ways to care for themselves. Um, Many people can feel very worn down and exhausted during this period. And it is. If you think back to other periods where resources have not been overly abundant or a lot of people living excess, it goes back to a time where it brings people into um, they work hard. They work hard, and there's nothing wrong with that in there. But they didn't oftentimes feel deprived. They had a lot of joys in those times. Uh, what we want to keep in mind with all of this is even though it can feel a little, again, like things are depleted right now, even though it can feel like that, um, the reality of it um, is that we're moving towards the soul's path. This is a transition period. So, really, this next 20 years is kind of a transition period to move us more and more onto the soul path. It's going to have to shake some stuff up to do that. And, I see that there's comments that I'm cutting out a bit, and I'm sorry for that. I've tried to secure the connection here as best as I possibly can. We've had rainstorms and going on today, and I think that might be interfering with things a little bit. So hopefully you guys are still getting everything in here. We're probably going to see a lot of religions that are going to come out with portraying this as God's wrath, anger, and punishment. We want to be very careful about that because, divine source is not trying to put a wrath on us, is not trying to. Is not going to be in anger or trying to punish us because as we know, you know things are we create our own circumstances. There's no need for that. And the loving divine source does not operate in that way. So we need to be careful of some of that programming and those narratives that are going to be coming through. So there's no doubt that things are going to match up with aspects that are biblical. There's no question about that, or other spiritual prophecies. Um, these times and this period in time is really connected to resetting a lot of things. And um, that's oftentimes just not a pretty sight to have to see. But this is what a lot of people came here for, was this work to help do this resetting, this transition. What a lot of people through that so that we don't fall into um, paths that are less favorable than than where we've been. And so this is pretty much kind of like a big cleansing of the earth that we're going to be going through, and things are going to have to be adjusted and repositioned, and again, shifting from this material existence to paths that are aligned with God and divine presence and the soul self. And during this time we could see major pestilence and disease rise up in the world. And it's going to be harder probably for crops to grow during this time. And we're likely to be shown where we've gone wrong in things. And these are um, where where we've allowed in too much technology, used too many chemicals in our skies and our land and on our food. And um, animals may even become inedible in many regions. And so a lot of stuff is going to probably come across. And again, this is going to match up biblically with a lot of things, but I think there's also a lot of um, human orchestrated stuff, or people that are on this earth that are orchestrating some of this as well. And again, we don't need to be in fear of this. We just need to be wise and responsible and practical and have some moderation with things. And we could easily even see an axis tilt during these 19 years. Um, during this time, and continents could actually be shifting locations a little bit. Mother Nature is going to send storms in, and that doesn't mean that they're, manipulated by man in some ways. There will be actual natural storms that will come in, and they could wipe out villages and communities and cities. So again, this is hard stuff to see. Again, it feels like it's heavy. It feels like it's going to be heavy in there, but again, this is where it's just important for us to uphold the light, keeping that heart energy, keeping that divine alignment. Some species may go extinct during this time, some may resurface during this time. We're likely to see all kinds of things from earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and landslides and canyons being opened and hills falling and mountains rising, and you got all kinds of things that are happening during this period. And all of these pieces, when we put together, is the destruction that's paving the way for new beginnings. So again, we don't want to get lost in the doom and the gloom and the so-called destruction that's going on. We want to keep our eyes focused on the new beginnings that we're moving towards. So we're probably going to see, just like in times of the plague and stuff like that, people isolated due to illness. And we've got to learn and share with each other, be of service where we can be of service, and really help each other through this. This is not going to be the time to hoard resources. That's not going to work. We want to keep enough to care for ourselves, and then we want to share what we can share. And a lot of people are going to get stripped of material things during this time, because this is not the time that's going to support materialism. And we're called to look at the spiritual processes that are in motion. We need to learn to care for our land and to regenerate it naturally. And even if you start to look at this, if you look at the regeneration processes, it takes time to regenerate the land. It's going to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to regenerate soil that has been damaged, or where some of the GMO crops have grown. So it's going to take a little time to do this restoration. We can't rush it, no matter how much we want it to be here sooner, in this. So that's all going to be important. And then to get an idea of the parallel times in history of what we're going through with this era, um, you can look back into around 1778 to 1798. That was the last time we had this influence. And when we look at that time frame, we had great revolutions, major changes in personal rights and social order going on. The US Constitution was drafted. The Industrial Revolution happened. It was a period of so-called enlightenment started. Women's rights were made known. The French Revolution happened. We also can go back into the mid 1500s, and this energetic pattern allowed the spreading of the Bible so that people had the power to question authorities. That was one of the positive parts of the Bible coming forth, and it allowed them to break free of being told what to do by political structures so that they could move forward on their own path and be free to worship God and honor their own beliefs. However, there were also religious wars between, like, the Catholics and the Protestants at that time, and that equates with the Middle Ages or the medieval times. And there again, it's a reminder that, we strong separation between cities and rural areas coming about. And but we shouldn't forget that people in most areas lived in a slave system as well. So again, we have dynamics that are playing out, and it's up to us. Are we going to stand in responsibility and abundance, or are we going to cave in and do whatever somebody tells us, even if it's not in our best interest, and be in deprivation? And that's a choice. That's a state of mind that is not attached to material things. Um, Again, diseases probably going to be very prominent in taking out a lot of life during this time, and it's going to hit plants, animals, and people. So it's not going to be isolated to one area or one region. And so our health, our nutrition, our rest, clean water, all of that become a major priority. and it's so important to know where to get that, um, and to honor those things. So some people are going to say this is a great recession. Well, yeah, in some ways it is. It's a very similar energy to recession energy that is going on, and we can see two extremes that could happen, and they could waver in and out, and they could be dependent on different areas. We could see an extreme lack of jobs that happens, or we could see a major inability to fill jobs that comes up during this period. And that could be based on the health of people in a certain area. Where there are many healthy people, jobs may be scarcer. Where there are many people that fall ill, then you could have a hard time filling jobs. We could see this being a time where we learn a great deal about our health and diseases going on. I think that's very probable to see come up. People start to remember, hey, this is a big priority. And, that this has got to happen and we've got to put a focus on this. Technology is going to undergo a lot of major shifts and changes during this 19-year period, and we could even see the destruction of it. Um, and that may make way for greater spiritual technology, which will be interesting too. So tapping more into our own internal gifts, and I think that would be a beautiful thing to see come out of this, and realizing that we have that ability within us, and that we don't again have to rely so much on AI or other things. Um, so we still actually have a few different paths that can happen. And they're very different ones, and they may surface simultaneously. We could go back to medieval styles of living if we have socialist and communist structures allowed to rule and to govern. Um, and that would dissolve our middle class is what it would do. So you would have the rich, and the poor would be at the mercy of the rich, because they would have all their basic needs and everything held over them. On the other hand, we could see a return to more agricultural lifestyles and a bigger movement towards living off the land. Um, and this would be free of a lot of technology, if not all technology. Some may choose this, and others may be forced into it, like in rural communities, if they become cut off from services or removed from them. And this too, is creating major divisions and classes with little to no middle uh, class grouping in there. Um, we could see ghost towns coming out and emerging during this time. And that can happen either because people leave areas or smaller towns are wiped out, whether that's from diseases or being unable to make it, not having enough to make it on in there. And people may seek out the security that a bigger city has, um, and prefer to know that, hey, I've got a job and I can make a life for myself and this and that. So we have all these different possibilities that are still in play um, in here. And we have to be careful about not turning against each other, because those that are seeking power and control, um, can come in, and they're going to try to pit people out, and they're going to try to clear out some stuff. But hopefully we've got enough, shall I say, good people in place that we won't see some of that playing out, that we'll keep moving in the positive directions in there. And what we want to do is choose a path. We can choose a path where which many spiritual people already kind of seek after, and that includes very simple ways of living, working in harmony with each other, with the earth. In those societies, AI is is an option. It's an option and not a requirement, because we draw on our own divine senses and gifts instead of equipment and machinery. People unfold their own organic and divine aspects and qualities, and this um, health can either be what we need. We can live in a natural state of abundance and joy in this mindset, and it um, time to create the restoration. So, even though it's can restore stuff in this situation, we can restore all of our land, our food, our air, and our water to healthy states. And to me, that's a really positive thing. Again, this is about choice. and we have that ability to choose these paths. So while it takes, time to do it, we can do it. We may also see some overlap in these things. And again, cities could become very technologically advanced, like the smart cities we've heard about, for those that want power and control and are money focused. And then, um, doing that. And then, um, we may also see an end to some of those cities. So again, it just can go different directions. um, Rural communities are probably going to be the strongest survivors in this because they're already used to not having a lot of resources. They're already used to working more as a community and knowing people around the community. So it's going to be very interesting to see which direction this plays out. Um, and it's going to be um, things like illness and barren land that is going to expose the darkness of sustainable agendas or components like that. Green practices, smart technology. We're gonna see that it will take some of that decline to expose it in there. And at this time, we're not just fighting for a few freedoms. We're fighting for the right for humans to exist, for organic matter, which carries divine um, coding and divine source energy within it to continue to be here. And as I've told people, I said, don't live in the fear. Earth is immortal and Earth is going to go on. Earth is going to survive. It's just a matter of how we shift that energy. But we definitely want to stand up for as much organic matter, humans, plants, animals, to make it as possible because that is all holding the God coding in it. And that's very, very important to have here. So if we're going to survive this, we have a couple of key things that we need to learn and to live in. And that is to first know our own value and worth. We have been race so taken on as a human race, and we need to remember how valuable and how worthy we are as organic humans and as the essence really of God in this aspect. And so it is very important um, to know that. So know your value and your worth, and then we must know and choose our own divinity. And we must know where we come from and who we really are and fully embrace that. And if you realize that you come from divine source or God and you are the essence of that, you will realize that we are the true value and worth. No AI equipment, none of the technology will ever be worth more than that. Because when we really understand that to the big capacity of what we hold within us, it's an incredible value, which is why humans are such a target, which is why organic life has become such a target in these days and times. So we need to stop competing with each other. And if we embrace our true value and worth, then we can enjoy our time here and we can pull away a lot of this competition energy. And to do this, we have to stop chasing trying to be superior over each other. We have to stop seeking all the recognition, the fame, the status, and selling ourselves to material things. And we need to embrace and strengthen our gifts and harmonize them instead of rejecting them or using them like a weapon. This is so very important here. So we've got to recommit ourselves to God or divine source and supporting and growing the divine presence here on earth. And that means we've got to pass the test. We've got to be practical. We've got to be responsible. We've got to be in our abundance. And we've got to resist the temptations that so called evil puts before us. And what is evil? In the realm of codes, evil is that which appears very attractive and very charming and very enticing, but it is not good for us. And so we have to be able to resist those temptations. We need to release our addictions, and we must choose that real and true victory and success and happiness and joy, which comes from divine source and not material things. So this is very, very important. Again, I know some people think this is heavy, this is boring, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but what comes out of that being a little responsible is so much more enjoyable. It's kind of like having that little sacrifice. Like if you just hold off a little bit, you can have that amazing meal or whatever. It's just, it just is worth every piece of effort that we put into it. And I don't think that I can really stress that enough. As we go in and we look at our starseed energy that's coming in, now, the current starseed grouping began in February of 2012, and that's continuing through to January of 2026. So, again, we have actually several things that are going to be completing here in the next year, which is another reason 2025 is a big year of we got to get through this stuff and complete it. And the souls that are coming in, again, when we have these souls coming in, it's not just coming in those children and those births, but it is also becoming present in our world. It's also what is being birthed into our world and the collective energy, in addition to those souls. And their whole purpose basically is centered in the aspects of death and rebirth. So they are here, and those that are being born in are helping to make this transition happen. And they're all about transformation and purification. And when we look at this from a soul level, we don't mind some of this destruction that has to go on in order to get more onto the soul's path. We realize the value and the worth of that. And, it's no coincidence that they're showing up when Earth and humans are called to let go of their destructive ways. They're here to help us get rid of that. Um, and there's no coincidence that they arrive at a time where there is so much death and destruction that is happening and being present in the world that we have to get through. Again, we want to look at this like you're entering that tunnel, and it may feel like you're in the darkness, but eventually you'll get to the other side and you'll come out the other side, and you'll come into that light, so to say, as a just proverbial example of that. And this group of star seeds are really about helping us to learn and understand how to be successful. So even though we have to buckle up temporarily, um, again, it's really teaching us how to be truly successful, right? We don't find that true success living in the debt, living in the excessive success, the success components. And so their energy, over this last year, it's the completion of this, of showing us what is going to be true success and what that is. And they're going to serve as hope and inspiration for us. So we're actually going to see in 2025 some hope and inspiration that, yeah, everything isn't all darkness and despair and all of that. And it's going to help light the way for us to get through this major initiation period that we're in. It's going to help move us out of great danger and devastation. So, again, even though we have to do the work, we're going to have those little pieces of hope in there that are going to keep shining the way of what direction to go. And they're here to make certain that we don't lose our way, and that we pay attention to things and we listen to things. The caution is in this group is that there will probably be those that will create death and destruction. And we see that play out in the world, but here again, those that are being born into that, and they bring in the energy of strange accidents and happenings, and they want to bring down the fall of empires in here. And in this later aspect, we have to be very careful, because it's important that we create and focus on a world that supports them in being able to use their energy in its truth and not its distortions. And when I say that, if they use it in their truth, they can be that great regenerator. They can be that great purifier in the world, instead of the great destroyer of the world. And that's important. So we really want to pay attention to how we're nurturing these kids that are coming in. And when it's used in its truth, it can bring down the structures that inhibit us from peace and joy in the world, because what happens is they become great warriors of God or divine source in there. And we're likely to see these kids grow up to be doctors and soldiers and healers, psychologists, therapists, working in industries connected to disaster relief or rebuilding um, communities or things like that. And they've got a really strong ability to deal with death and to do the hard work that has to be done. And we have to remember that we have that within us. We have the ability to deal with this. Yes, we're going to see some things that are not pleasant, but we have the ability to deal with it. And they are the ones that will be here to ensure our freedom and to provide safety and protection for us, which is great because after another 5 years or however many years, who's going to carry on and make sure that we continue to move in a favorable direction? Generation that's being born in that started in 2012 and are now growing up. They're what, 12 on the front end of this, so they are going to be the ones that carry it through in here. Let them be fostered by so-called evil intentions and agendas, then they could become that proverbial evil scientists, militia enforcers, all kinds of things that we'd rather not think about that move towards the globalist and the um, communist type lifestyles in there. So that's why it's so important. If we're purifying our own self, our own life, our own behaviors, that's going to go a long way to helping to keep them on track as well, and fostering an environment and a world that's going to support their energy to be used in positive ways. And these star seeds can be incredible teachers, but it's up to us whether they will teach us how to get through the hardships with compassion or whether they will teach us about great pain. And again, this is all a choice that we have. And our choices determine whether we go through their group in a way that brings us into peace or in a way that destroys peace and joy. So lots of big choices on the forefront here. As we move into the generational energy that's coming up in this year, currently, the generation that we're in, we entered in March of 2019, and that's going to run through April of 2026, with a few that will linger, and come in a little after that, so to say. But these are going to be the ones that have the ability to step into positions of power and authority. So we're really going to want to keep our eye on this grouping here because they're probably going to be like the next set of world leaders that are going to be coming up. They're going to be the next big set of influencers that are going to be coming through, and they're the ones that have the ability to move mountains. But again, also just their energy being birthed in is reminding us we have the ability to move mountains. We have the ability to do big things. We've got to take hold and do it though. And again, because this energy ends in April of 2026, we've got this year to make some of those big moves, and this is the time to do it. This is the time to, really, really come into support of a favorable direction. And this generation is going to rebel against what disrupts their peace, their freedom of speech, and their ability to be generous. Um, and against those that damage the earth and impinge on their right to practice their beliefs. So these are all concepts that are going to come up in 2025. This whole aspect where we're going to see people rebelling against um, what disrupts peace, rebelling against any suppression or censorship, and you know course, they want to help, they want to make differences, and that's all possible. That is all possible if we will allow it to be possible. But again, we've got to do the work. So they will tend to be fed up with traditional structures, and they're going to need to have some adventure, and they're going to be happiest when they're doing something. This is not the time. And again, we talk about sometimes we let things overwhelm us and become so big, and we make it so big in our mind, instead of embracing it with a more adventurous spirit, instead of realizing that if we keep ourselves in motion and we're putting forth the effort and the work, that we're actually going to be happier than if we don't do anything at all in there. So this generation is going to be very practical, very real. Again, reading into the facts this year, and they can enjoy the finest things in life, but they're going to be happiest with the simplest. And I think that's going to be a very positive movement we're going to see in 2025, where even those people who can afford nice things are going to be happier with simpler things. And we're going to see that movement back towards that direction. Music is going to play a really big role and be very powerful. So, this can actually be birthing new musicians, bringing out new music eras, to come about new music forms, in a sense, or styles coming up. And music will be powerful for people. It may be part of what helps get people through some of the challenges that are going on. And I think a lot of these kids, they're going to draw naturally to music, whether that's playing in a band or playing an instrument or singing or any of that. They're going to have a natural draw towards music in here. Um, Kindness and helping others are going to be very important to them. So again, we'll see that surface up in the world, and they can even speak up and get upset when people don't help. uh, See much, but more calling people out, like, I don't care what your beliefs are, get out there and help the person that needs to be helped, in there. And yeah, if somebody's just not trying to help themselves, that's a different story. But if they're really trying to help themselves, then that's going to be important. And overall, for these kids, they need a more peaceful world. They need they need an unconditional love in their life. They need peaceful environments, and a big part of what they're here to do is teach us how to do that, how to create that in our world. And they tend to get along with just about everybody, and they believe very strongly in life is meant to be celebrated. So this is going to be an interesting mindset that's going to be emerging, not only again in these children, but we're going to start seeing emerging in our world. And that, I believe, also is a positive thing. Um, but these kids do have a very deep nature in this generation, and they will only keep those in their life um, that can sincerely celebrate their successes. So they're not going to be into a lot of superficial relationships, even if they'll help a lot of people. Um, the people that are close to them are the people that are going to be celebrating successes with them, that are going to be moving in this positive direction. They will tend to love really intensely, and they need a partner that's going to have depth and that will settle down and make a life with them. um, they're going to be a generation that's going to be stopping this concept of having all kinds of affairs and multiple relationships and multiple marriages and all of that sort of thing. So they're going to move us away from that component. And then finally, what we have in our world influences during this time, and I know I'm going on, but like I said, there's a lot of information to cover here. Um, as we get into our world influences, we entered a new set of world influences on March 8 of 2023, and they're going to be in effect until February of 2026. So again, basically through the end of this year, and we'll start to see a preview of the incoming influences showing up around May of 2025. And like our generational influences, there's going to be some remnants of this energy that will resurface even after we kind of leave it and move out of it. But as we come into this new set of influences, we're really being called to learn how to be, again, this responsibility, this practical in life. Um, and again, joy doing that, stop making it a bad thing, I think, and start embracing offer. Um, and it's likely that even though life can feel a bit heavy because it can feel like, okay, I don't get a lot of breaks or a lot of enjoyment time, again, once we get the task accomplished, we're going to be in a good space. Um, and the key is to not allow what needs to get done to overwhelm us. If we again take hold and do it, things will flow with greater ease, and it really won't be that bad to get through. A lot of major progress happening in the world. So again, 2025 is going to see a lot of development, a lot of progress, a lot of shifts, a lot of big changes, either whether we hear of them or they're getting set in motion this year. Um, we're going to see a lot of that happening. And one of the biggest lessons, again, is learning to live within our means, getting out of this debt system. So critical in this year. Um, and it's important that we a time where we don't rely on what is supposed to come to us, but again, we're learning to work with what we have in hand, getting down to real resources, not all the fake resources, not all of the should be coming in or this or that, but the what we actually have. And we need to let go again of the fancy, the extravagant things. And yeah, we may not have a lot of so-called fun this year, but that doesn't mean that it isn't going to be amazing and exciting and um, come with a lot of successes because I really believe it can. Again, depending on where we keep our energy, it can be very productive and very rewarding for us. Um, and we want to allow ourselves to be a little creative. You know, again, if you, it's like going to the kitchen. You know, here's a set of ingredients. What do you want to make with it? And getting a little creative with it. Kind of like, in our younger days, you didn't have a lot of money maybe to eat on in your younger days, right? Your college years or whatever. And, you had to get creative with what was in the cupboards until you got paid. And kind of going back to that kind of a concept. But in the end, I think people are going to find that if they can embrace that responsibility, they're going to be just as happy or happier working with getting a little creative with what they have instead of spending it to people. This is a time where we need to do things as they work for us. Again, coming back into that aspect, not allowing people to manipulate us into what they want, but honoring what we know is in that soul alignment. And again, others may not be totally reliable. So, if there are things that need to be done, we need to plan on doing them ourselves. And if somebody shows up to help us do that, that's great in there. Um, and sometimes it even works out better for us to do things that way. So each person's a little bit different. We want to listen to our intuition really strongly and learn how to work with it. Um, we want to learn how to use our intuition in practical ways. Now, one of the things is I think sometimes people get confused when they're trying to listen to intuitive messages, and oftentimes you'll feel it in your gut or your heart or things like that. But one of my checkpoints that I like to use is, what is the piece of advice I'm getting from my intuition, so to say, and is it telling me to do something that's practical and responsible, or is it telling me to do something frivolous? Um, if it's leading me with something that's aligned with something that is practical, responsible, things like that, then it's probably on target and I need to listen to it. If it's telling me to go out and buy, $100,000 car when I make $10,000 a year, well, that's probably not my intuition. That's probably my human will trying to appear as my intuition in there. So that's kind of one of my checkpoints is, what is it telling me? Now, under this influence, we're also going to likely see a lot of kind of spiritual businesses thrive. And when I say that, I think a lot of people are going to turn to fortune tellers, tarot readers, mystics, and other people that they believe are intuitive for insight and advice. And we have to be very careful because, yes, there are some people who are naturally gifted and they are good at what they do. And we may even have leaders that have more of a spiritual foundation or lead through divine alignment coming forward. Um, but they will only, work out if they can ground their energy into practical pieces and practical action. And people need to be able to decipher between those that are truly divinely prophetic through God and between, those people and those that are just telling you what you want to hear. If somebody's just telling you what you want to hear, they may not really be that prophet. They may not really be that true intuitive. They're just making money off of you telling you what you want to hear. So be careful of that. And those that are not standing in divine alignment can easily lead people down some really dangerous paths. So, again, how are they grounding that energy? Does it match up with something that's practical and responsible? That's a core piece that we're coming back to this year. Um, and these couple of years are likely to bring forth, again, a lot of death energy that is surfacing during this time. And those deaths can happen from accidents. They may not make sense. They may not seem physically possible at times. Some will be genuine accidents. For example, if somebody has broken through a soul process and is standing in divine alignment, and then others will be maybe the result of negative energy at play or trying to block humanity from making breakthroughs. Deaths may appear to be accidents, but may actually be something orchestrated in there, and this will especially likely be something that could happen when people are breaking through into the truth of things, like with our whistleblowers, and not wanting to go down those corrupt paths and are breaking away from controlling leadership. So we really just want to keep our eyes open. The key is to stay really diligent and again in these obligations and responsibilities. And again, so much comes back to this. This influence is so heavy in 2025. And a lot of our ability to do that will help us to break through the agendas that have been set up to work against humanity. So when you stop and think about it, you think, hey, if just being a little practical and responsible and moderating things gets us out of these agendas that are planned against humanity, then hey, I'm all in. I'm all in for practical and responsible in there. Um, and again, that brings us back into working more as a team instead of becoming slaves into those people who are arrogant, narcissistic, things like that. Um, and it's during this time that a lot of the corrupt players will try to make people believe that they know what is better for them. So they're going to use this tactic again. We know what's best for you. Using these guilt tactics and things. They want to try to make people believe that they have an obligation and responsibility to support the corruption. And we've got to stand up to that because that is not uh, being responsible at all when we do that. And one of their biggest tactics is to pit people against each other during this time, that divide and they will be seeking to tell people what to do and to devalue them as much as possible. Again, that they are the spark of God, they are the spark of divine source. This is one of our great lessons, again, through value as divine, as a divine being. Um, and so, don't we can't let people make us believe that we are less than those that are trying to push forth these agendas. They're going to use the narrative of having a great vision of working together as a team, but really mean only their elite groups and their networks will be doing that, and it's not really a vision. It's not really a vision. Their so-called visions are what they want to implement. Um, they're not true visions, and they're full of muddiness and cloudiness and fluffy spiritual terminology and things like that. And that leads people to believe that they are doing a good thing when the only people that will benefit um, are those that are implementing those plans. So a lot of unfulfilled promises will come from those people in doing that. And we're in this period this year of a lot of grand illusions, a lot of double talk going on, keeping people too numbed out and disoriented to see what's happening, to see where they're being taken out. Um, and this again requires even greater discernment to go on, and we're probably going to see attempts to create greater surges in medical marijuana, drug running, supporting and letting cartels do what they wish. That is all going to be things that they're going to try to push. Again, we've got to stand up and say no. We've got to be responsible. And there's probably going to be greater pushes for drugs and pharmaceuticals and medications. Now, when we look at this dispersed with the illness and everything like that, we can easily see how this connects into some of those agendas that have been put out there where you create that illness, then you push the drugs on people. And it really comes back to, there you go, there's your profit, there's what's happening. And of course, they know that the more they keep people drugged out, the more they keep them on pharmaceuticals, the less energy that they have to fight them with, and the less resistant they become. Medications and prescriptions and things, street drugs and prescription drugs are probably going to accidental deaths, or we will see people using them to try to escape the world. But those that are wise are going to find the strength. They're going to be responsible in their own soul processes, and they'll choose to let go of the addictions and the drugs and things like that. So, on one hand, we will see the deaths coming from those things. On the other hand, we will see a lot of people letting those things go and getting out of them. And fortunately, that is going to happen by choice for most people. It could happen for some through a bad experience that forces them in that direction. But as society and as a world, we're going to have to face these issues this year in our country, in the world. We're going to have to learn ways to cope with reality instead of trying to escape it. And that's where, they say we've coddled our kids too much. We've given them too easy of a time in here, and that's challenging. Um, just as I wrap up a little bit here with the year stuff, to give you an overview, I kind of created my own little grid and chart in here, and that responsibility energy is extremely heavy in January, but we have a nice balancing factor in January that is the abundance energy. So that does bring people more into the heartfelt energy. That does give people some of the strength to really care about people. It does support us, and at least having successes where we are putting the effort and the energy into it. Our spike day in January is January 13th, when we have a lot of big energy that spikes up that day. So what I've created is actually shows me where we're going to have these magnified energy days of multiple things peaking out beyond the patterns there. So the January 13th is going to be a big day to watch out for on here as we move into February. Have some of that and obligation energy and meeting all of that stuff in the first half of the month, but throughout, again, abundance, success energy coming through, a lot of heartfelt energy, a lot of compassion energy coming through. So that's going to help us out a lot. We don't have any major real spikes of energy happening in February. So, in some ways that'll be lower key than January. As we move into March, again, we have a lot of energy around lessons through our experiences that are coming up during that time. Also, some of the obligation, responsibility, energy weighing in heavy early in the month, and then we do have one day in there where the 14th. It's not real heavy, but we do have some stuff where past stuff gets dredged up in there. And then on March 29th, we have a little spike in energy, but again, not major stuff happening in there. As we move into April, the responsibility and obligation energy gets real heavy again in that month. We have 2 days that we have big spikes of energy that are coming up that day, and that's going to be April 13th and April 27th. So you might want to just take note of those. That I think a lot of stuff will happen on these spiked energy points. As we go into May, um, May doesn't have any big energy happening in it. There's nothing that's overly dominating we have 2 days that will spike a little bit, but not as much as some of the other months, and that would be May 12th and May 27th in there. And then in June is very light. I think June's going to be a very low key month overall. for a lot of things, nothing dominating there. And July is very much the same as far as that's concerned. So it's almost like we're getting a little bit of a break in there. Um, and August, August, we don't have overly dominating patterns anywhere too much. I mean, that's overpowering the whole time. But we do have a spike of energy coming up on August 9th. And let's see here, going into September and next fall, we have a lot of dominant energy and lessons being learned in the last month, but in the first two-thirds of the month, we have to be really careful. A lot of deception energy going around at that time, a lot of lies and manipulation. And we do get a spike of energy in September on September 7th, which is interesting. Not quite that September 11th anniversary date, but September 7th that it's happening. And then in October, we have a lot of energy that's focused on the past being brought forward and connections between past, present, and future. So choices become extra, extra important in the month of October. And we have a big spike of energy that happens on October 7th coming up in our year. And we have a couple of smaller spikes of energy that show up on the 21st and the 22nd of October. And then in November, November the 1st, um, week and a half or so of the month, we have a lot of emphasis where we'll have a lot of stuff coming out that we'll be learning. I think people are going to start to feel some breathing room off and on in November, like they can get out and maybe have a little bit of fun at that time. We're going to see a big spike of energy November 5th. And we have a little bit lower spike on the 6th. So, since those are back to back, I think that's going to be a pretty strong time in there. And then November 20th, we also have a decent spike of energy that shows up at that time. And then as we close the year out, our biggest pattern circles back into that responsibility and obligation energy in there. And we have a big spike of energy that shows up on December 4th. It's a really major spike that's in there. When we look at some of the health aspects, um, and challenges and that we see present again, I think they will weave in and out of some of these things, but if we're holding the responsibility and the obligation energy, we're really not going to have major problems with it. So that kind of gives you the overview of um, the year, and that took longer than I expected. So I know our call is going to run over a little bit here. Thanks everybody for hanging in there with me because, like I said, it was so much information to cover. But again, you can read everything in your book, and you can get the more layers and the more details specific to certain dates within the year within the book in there, the code journey. For those that don't know which book I'm talking about, the code journey for 2025 uh, in there, and that will fill you in even more. So I hope I didn't overwhelm you with too much in there. And with that, I am going to um, open up for our chat if anybody wants to jump on live. You'll have to take yourself off of mute if there's any comments that you make. I see we have a couple of new people in here um, on this session. So there you go. How about it?